They say the scariest horror stories don't come from books or movies, they come from real life. From real people, real homes, and real suffering. And the story I'm about to tell you is one of the darkest ever recorded. A case that left doctors baffled, priests shaken, and an entire courtroom frozen in terror when the evidence was played aloud. This is not fiction. This is the true story that inspired the exorcism of Emily Rose. The story of a girl who lived in a small German town, and who died while fighting forces no one could fully explain. Her real name was Anneliese Michel. Before we go forward, like the video, subscribe my channel and press the bell icon. Anneliese grew up in a strict Catholic household in Bavaria. She was a bright student, soft-spoken, deeply devoted to her faith. At first glance, she was completely ordinary. But at 16, her life veered into darkness. One night, she woke suddenly, gasping for air. She couldn't move, her chest felt crushed under an unseen weight. Her eyes darted around the room, and in the corner, she swore she saw something. A dark figure, darker than the night itself, staring at her. Its eyes glowed red. When she finally regained movement, she screamed. Her parents rushed in, but nothing was there. Doctors told her it was sleep paralysis. A harmless condition. But Anneliese knew, it was not harmless. The visions grew worse. She saw shadowy faces grinning at her from doorways, heard whispers that made her blood run cold. She was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy and given medication. For a while, the pills dulled the seizures. But they did nothing for the visions. Because soon, the voices began. At first, they were faint, murmurs in the background, like a radio on low volume. But they grew louder, clearer. They mocked her prayers, laughed when she tried to study. They told her she was damned, that she belonged to them. Her family grew worried, but still trusted the doctors. But then, the physical changes began. By 19, Anneliese's behavior had shifted into something terrifying. She became aggressive, violent. She screamed for hours at night, her throat raw, until her family feared the neighbors would call the police. She destroyed religious objects in the house, crucifixes, rosaries, holy pictures, smashing them as though they burned her to touch. Her body seemed to change, too. She grew gaunt, her skin pale, her eyes sunken. And the strength was unnatural. She would thrash against multiple grown men, throwing them off her like rag dolls. She began crawling on the floor, barking and snarling like a dog, gnashing her teeth so hard they cracked. Once, her mother found her eating a dead bird she had caught outside. Another time, she licked her own urine from the floor, hissing like an animal when her family tried to stop her. No pill could explain this. No seizure disorder made someone scream in perfect Latin and Aramaic, languages she had never studied. The Michel family begged the church for help. But in the 1970s, the Catholic Church was extremely cautious about exorcisms. They demanded proof. Investigators watched Anneliese. They saw her recoil violently from holy water, shrieking when the sign of the cross was made over her. They recorded her voice, deep, guttural growls, layered with multiple tones, coming from her thin, frail body. And eventually, the church agreed. Anneliese was possessed. Father Arnold Renz and Father Ernst Alt were assigned to her case. What followed would go down as one of the most infamous exorcisms in history. The first session began in September 1975. The priest stood in a candlelit room, crucifix in hand, Bible open. Anneliese was tied down, her wrists bound to prevent her from clawing herself bloody. When the ritual began, she convulsed violently, her body arching, her face contorting into something unrecognizable. Then, a voice emerged. Not her soft, girlish voice, but a deep, rasping growl that filled the room. I am Lucifer. I am Cain. I am Judas. I am Hitler. I am Nero. We are many. The priests recoiled, but pressed on, commanding the demons to leave. The air grew suffocating, heavy with the stench of sulfur. The candles flickered violently as Anneliese laughed, a cold, inhuman sound that echoed through the walls. Over the next 10 months, 67 exorcisms were performed, each one more brutal than the last. Witnesses described her strength as impossible. 6 men couldn't hold her down. She would break her restraints, throwing herself across the room, smashing into walls until bruises covered her body. Her screams could be heard from the street, blood-curdling wails that made even the priests tremble. And the voices. The recordings are still out there. Layered, monstrous voices overlapping, arguing, mocking. At times, several spoke at once, each claiming to be a different demon. Neighbors whispered about strange activity. They claimed to see flickering lights in the windows, hear guttural sounds late at night. Some said they saw shadowy figures standing at the edge of the Michel's property, watching silently before disappearing into the trees. Her body deteriorated. She stopped eating, claiming the demons forbade her. Her knees were broken from performing hundreds of forced genuflections a day, dropping to her knees and rising again in endless cycles of torment. Her face became skeletal, her eyes hollow. Yet through it all, she begged for prayers. She believed her suffering was serving a purpose. She once whispered to her mother, "I must suffer for the sins of others. But I will be freed." The final exorcism came on June 30, 1976. By then, Anneliese weighed just 68 pounds. Her lips cracked and bleeding, her teeth broken from constant gnashing, her hands covered in sores. That night, she thrashed violently, her voice alternating between screams and desperate prayers. The priests commanded the demons to leave, shouting Latin rites over her as she writhed on the floor. And then, silence. For the first time in months, her voice returned to normal. She looked at her mother, tears in her eyes, and whispered her last words, "Mother, I'm afraid." The next morning, Anneliese Michel was dead. But the horror wasn't over. Her death sparked one of the most controversial trials in German history. Her parents and the two priests were charged with negligent homicide. The courtrooms echoed with arguments. Was Anneliese a victim of mental illness, abandoned by medicine? Or had she truly been consumed by something darker? The most chilling evidence was the tapes. The jury heard them, Anneliese's small frame producing multiple voices, growling, laughing, cursing God in tongues she never learned. Even hardened lawyers paled at the sound. The priests were convicted, but only lightly sentenced. The church never denied the case, but quietly buried it. To this day, the debate rages. Was Anneliese Michel possessed, or was she a tragic victim of untreated mental illness and blind faith? Skeptics insist it was epilepsy and psychosis. Believers say no science can explain her voice, her strength, her knowledge of ancient languages. Her grave has become a site of pilgrimage. Visitors claim to hear whispers in the wind, faint cries at night, and strange shapes in photographs. Some say her suffering continues, that her soul was never freed. And here's the part that keeps people awake at night. Possession doesn't require belief. It doesn't wait for you to invite it. It only needs an opening, a moment of weakness, despair, or fear. So the next time you wake in the dark, and you feel the weight pressing down on your chest, when you hear a whisper in the corner of your room, or a shadow moves just out of sight, ask yourself, is it just a dream? Or is it something waiting, like it waited for Anneliese Michel? Because sometimes, the scariest horror stories are the ones that never end.